Before everything fell apart, life with my service dog actually felt stable. And I don't use that word lightly. For someone like me, stability wasn't something I ever really had before him. He wasn't just a dog, he was like an anchor that kept me from floating off when the world got too loud, too heavy, too overwhelming. I still remember the first night he slept by my bed. It was quiet, just me, the hum of the fan, and him breathing softly on the floor. And for the first time in years, I didn't wake up with that crushing weight on my chest. He was there, and somehow my body just knew it was safe. It's funny how animals can do that, isn't it? They don't say a word, but their presence speaks louder than anything. Day to day, he gave me more freedom than I ever thought possible. I didn't have to rely on people as much, which was huge for me. Simple things like walking into a crowded grocery store. He'd stay by my side, nudging my leg when he sensed I was tensing up. If I froze, he'd ground me, leaning into me until I could breathe again. And if I dropped something, he'd scoop it right up and place it in my hand like it was no big deal. Little things, yes. But when you've lived without that kind of support, those little things start to feel like miracles. One of my favorite memories, I can still see it so clearly, was a rainy afternoon. I was curled up on the couch, feeling that storm inside my chest that never really announces itself. It just takes over. My dog hopped up next to me, pressed his head into my lap, and stayed there. No judgment, no sighing in frustration. Just him, telling me in his own way, "I've got you." And I believed it. For once in my life, I really believed someone, or something, had me. And maybe that's why losing him later felt like losing a part of myself. Because he wasn't just trained to help me, he wanted to. His eyes would light up when he got it right, when he knew he'd made me smile or pulled me back from a panic attack. He gave me dignity. He gave me independence. And for a while there, I thought maybe I could actually live a normal life. Or at least my version of it. Yeah, before my in-laws decided they knew better, before they ripped that sense of safety away from me. I had something precious. I had trust. I had hope. And it all started with him. A dog who cost me $25,000, but honestly, he was worth every cent and more. When I got married, I thought I was gaining a second family. You know how people always say, when you marry someone, you marry their whole family? Well, I didn't fully grasp how true that was until I found myself in the middle of their world. At first, everything seemed fine, polite even. Smiles. At dinners, small talk about work, the weather, the usual. But underneath those polite nods and forced smiles, I could feel it. That subtle disapproval radiating from them every time my dog walked into the room. It started small, just little comments I tried to brush off. "Oh, that dog sheds so much hair, doesn't it?" Or, "Wow, must be expensive to feed a big animal like that." The kind of things you laugh at nervously, hoping they're just joking. Except they weren't. Their tone always carried that edge, that judgment, like my dog was some sort of luxury handbag I was flaunting instead of a lifeline I depended on. There was this one moment early on that sticks with me. We were at their house for dinner, the whole family gathered around, plates clinking, laughter bouncing across the table. My dog was curled quietly at my feet, not making a sound, not begging, not moving. Perfectly behaved, like he always was. And then my mother-in-law looked under the table, wrinkled her nose, and said, "I don't understand why people treat animals like children. At the end of the day, it's just a dog." Just a dog. I smiled weakly, forced a bite of food, pretended it didn't sting. But inside, I was screaming. Because he wasn't just a dog. He was the reason I could even sit at that table without having a meltdown. The reason I was even functional enough to be there. I wanted to shout that at her, to make her understand, but I stayed quiet. I told myself, pick your battles. Keep the peace. Still, the unease grew. Every visit, every interaction, there was always this tension hovering over us. Like I had brought something dirty into their pristine world, and no matter how calm, clean, or perfectly trained my dog was, he would never be enough for them. Sometimes I caught my father-in-law's eyes lingering a little too long on the leash in my hand, like it was a chain keeping me tethered instead of a lifeline keeping me free. And I guess that's the moment I should have paid closer attention. Because those weren't just casual opinions. Those were warning signs. And looking back now, I can see it so clearly. They weren't ever going to accept him. Or me. At least not the version of me that needed him. At the time, though, I convinced myself it was fine. Families disagree on things all the time, right? People make comments, you ignore them, you move on. I thought, maybe if they got to know him better, they'd see. They'd understand. But I was wrong. Very wrong. You know how some people can say 1,000 words without actually saying anything at all? That was my in-laws. Out in public, around friends or extended family, they kept it civil. Smiles, polite nods, that practiced were all. Fine here act. But behind closed doors, that's when the cracks started to show. It was little things at first, things they thought I wouldn't notice. A pointed look when my dog walked into the living room. A sigh when I bent down to fill his water bowl in the kitchen. Sometimes they'd wipe the counter down immediately after I prepared his food, like he was spreading some sort of disease just by existing in the same space. And then came the jokes. The ones that weren't really jokes at all. Oh, we don't need an alarm system. The dog can just bark at strangers, they'd say with this smirk, even though they knew he wasn't trained to bark like that. Or, if you didn't spend so much time with the dog, maybe you'd have more time for your husband. Everyone would laugh, except me. I'd force a smile, swallow the lump in my throat, and pretend it didn't sting. But inside, it burned. There was one night that still replays in my head. I had a panic attack out of nowhere. It happens sometimes, like a wave that crashes before you even know you're in the water. My dog was right there, pressing against me, guiding me to sit, grounding me with that steady weight. My hands shook, my breathing was shallow, but he kept nudging me until I calmed down. When I finally pulled myself together, I heard voices outside the door. My in-laws, whispering, but just loud enough. She's so dramatic. All that fuss, and she thinks the dog actually helps. A chuckle, then silence. I sat there, hand tangled in my dog's fur, and I felt two completely different things at once. Relief, because he had just pulled me out of the darkest moment. And humiliation, because the very people who were supposed to be family thought it was all a show. Like my pain was an act, and my service dog was just a prop. From that point on, I started to feel like I was living a double life. With my dog, I felt safe, seen, capable. But the moment my in-laws were around, that safety cracked. I'd keep my voice steady, avoid bringing him into conversations, try not to draw attention to how much I relied on him. I was shrinking myself just to make them comfortable. But here's the truth I didn't want to admit back then. No matter how much I bent, no matter how much I tried to keep the peace, they weren't going to change. Their disapproval wasn't going to vanish just because I smiled through the sting. Looking back, all those little jokes, the sighs, the whispers, they weren't harmless. They were building towards something much bigger, something I never imagined they'd actually do. That I'll never forget that day. It's etched into my memory in a way that almost feels cinematic, except there was nothing beautiful about it. Just silence. Too much silence that I came home, keys jingling in my hand, expecting the usual greeting. Pause against the floorboards, the excited thump of a tail, that low whine he'd give me like he was saying, "You're back. I missed you." But when I opened the door, nothing. The house was quiet. Eerily quiet. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he was asleep in the other room. Maybe he was chewing on his toy. I called his name, once, twice, louder the third time. Still nothing. That's when this strange, heavy feeling crept into my chest. I walked through the house, checking every corner, every room, even the backyard. Empty. His bowls were gone. His leash wasn't hanging by the door. His bed wasn't in its usual spot. It was like he had been erased. Panic set in. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I grabbed my phone, dialed my husband, my voice shaking. "Where's the dog? Did you take him somewhere?" The pause on the other end told me everything before he even said the words. My parents, they thought it would be better. They found someone who could take him. Someone who doesn't mind the costs. I swear, the room spun. Better? Better for who? Certainly not for me. Not for the dog who had spent years learning how to keep me safe, who trusted me to keep him safe too. My knees gave out, and I sat on the floor where his bed used to be, staring at the blank space like if I stared long enough, he'd just reappear. My husband tried to explain, his voice dull, rehearsed almost. They just think it's too much money, too much responsibility. They were worried about you, about us. They didn't mean any harm. Didn't mean any harm. That phrase looped in my head like an echo. How do you take away someone's service dog? the one thing that gave them independence, stability, safety, and claim you didn't mean any harm. It felt like someone had ripped the air out of my lungs that I hung up the phone. I couldn't listen anymore. All I could hear was the silence of the house, the absence of pause on the floor, the absence of him. And it hit me. They hadn't just taken my dog. They'd taken my lifeline, my sense of safety, my trust. I remember curling up in that empty spot, clutching the leash they'd somehow missed, and whispering his name like he could still hear me. But the truth was, he was gone. And in that moment, so was the fragile sense of stability I had worked so hard to build. Grief has a strange way of moving through you. At first, it was just numbness, like my body couldn't fully process what had happened. I kept expecting to wake up the next morning and hear the familiar sound of paws clicking against the floor, or feel that gentle nudge against my leg when I froze up making coffee. But there was only emptiness, a silence so loud it pressed against my ears. Then the numbness cracked, and the anger came flooding in. Not the kind of anger where you yell or slam doors. No, this was the kind that sits heavy in your stomach, the kind that makes your hands shake when you're just sitting still. How could they do this? How could anyone justify ripping away the one thing that gave me stability, all because they didn't believe in it? I kept replaying the moment I first got him. $25,000. I remember staring at the check, my stomach twisting at the number. That's a lot of money, more than I had ever spent on anything in my life. But when I met him, when I saw him work with me for the first time, I knew. It wasn't just a dog. It was freedom. It was life-changing. Every dollar was worth it. And now? Gone. As if that decision, that sacrifice, meant nothing to them. I'd sit on the couch at night, gripping his old toy in my hand, tears just spilling without warning. I felt betrayed on so many levels, not just by my in-laws, but by my husband too. His silence hurt more than their words. At least they had the decency to be openly cruel. But him? He stood by and let it happen. And every time I thought about that, it felt like another knife twisting in my chest. There was this one night I broke completely. I was sitting on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, the leash clutched in my hands. I thought about how he used to come running the second he heard the metal clip jingle. The leash had always meant freedom, adventure, safety. Now it was just an empty strap of leather, mocking me. I whispered to myself, they took him. They really took him. Saying it out loud made it real in a way I didn't want it to be. And here's the thing. When someone steals something from you, money, an object, even your time, it hurts, but you can replace it. When they steal your trust, your security, that's not something you get back. Not easily. Not ever in the same way. I started to look at everything differently after that. Every word they'd said, every sigh, every so-called joke. All of it played back in my head like warning bells I'd ignored. And I hated myself a little for letting it get this far, for not protecting him better, for trusting people who never deserved it. Because in the end, that's what they shattered. Not just my bond with him, but my trust in the people who claimed to be family, that you'd think the person who vowed to stand beside you, in sickness and in health, would at least, well, stand beside you. But after my dog was taken, I realized my marriage wasn't the safe haven I thought it was. It felt more like standing alone in a storm, and the one person I expected to hold the umbrella was busy pretending it wasn't. Even raining. At first, I tried to be calm. I sat my husband down, voice trembling but steady enough, and asked him point blank, "How could you let this happen? How could you let them take him?" He wouldn't look at me. He just rubbed his forehead like I was the one being unreasonable. "They didn't mean any harm," he repeated. "They were just trying to help. You've been so stressed lately. Maybe they thought." I cut him off. "Help? You think taking away my service dog, the only thing keeping me grounded, is helping?" My voice cracked, but not from weakness. From rage. From heartbreak. That night turned into the first of many arguments. He kept minimizing it, as if the problem wasn't that his parents had crossed the most unthinkable boundary, but that I was overreacting. Overreacting. That word nearly broke me. Because how do you overreact to losing the one thing that keeps you functioning? The one being who has literally saved you, time and time again. I started to see the divide more clearly each day. His loyalty was split, and it wasn't splitting evenly. I wanted him to fight for me, for us, for the life we had built with my dog as part of it. But instead, he kept defending them. Kept asking, me to understand their perspective. Their perspective? Their perspective was ignorance wrapped in cruelty. And he wanted me to meet them halfway. There was one moment I'll never forget. We were in the middle of an argument, voices raised, tears hot on my cheeks, and I asked him, if they had taken me out of this house, would you still say they didn't mean any harm? He just stood there, silent, no answer. And in that silence, I heard everything I needed to know. The distance between us grew, not just emotionally, but physically. I found myself sleeping curled up on one side of the bed, clutching the empty leash like it could protect me from the loneliness that was spreading in my chest. He slept soundly beside me, or at least pretended to, and I lay awake wondering, if he couldn't stand with me in this, what would happen the next time I needed him? The truth was hard to swallow, but it became clearer every day. I hadn't just lost my service dog. I was losing my marriage too. Because what good is a partner who won't fight for you when it really counts? There's only so much a person can take before something inside them snaps. For me, the breaking point wasn't some dramatic scene. No screaming matches, no slammed doors. It was quieter than that. Quieter, but heavier. It happened one night when I was sitting in the living room alone. The TV was on, but I couldn't tell you what was playing. Just background noise, filling the silence where paws used to click across the floor. My husband was upstairs, and the house felt colder than usual, emptier. I glanced at the corner where my dog's bed used to be, that empty patch of carpet staring back at me like a wound that wouldn't heal. That's when it hit me. I didn't just feel alone. I was alone. That I thought back to all those moments he'd saved me. Like the time I nearly fainted in a grocery store, and he nudged me toward a chair, steadying me until I caught my breath. Or the countless nights he pressed himself against me when panic attacks stole the air from my lungs. Those weren't just conveniences. They were survival. And now, without him, every day felt like walking a tightrope without a net. My in-laws probably thought they'd done me a favor. That's the twisted part. They thought taking him away would force me to grow up, to stop depending on what they saw as a crutch. But here's the truth. I wasn't weaker because of him. I was stronger. Stronger than I'd ever been before he came into my life. And without him, I was crumbling. The fights with my husband had worn me down to nothing. Every conversation felt like walking into a wall. He wanted me to move on, to adjust, as if I could just replace the years of training, the bond, the trust, the way he knew me better than most people ever would. As if service dogs just grew on trees, like I could pick another one up tomorrow and everything would be fine. That night, sitting on the couch, I realized I had two choices. Either I stayed, kept swallowing my pain, kept pretending I could, live in a house where my lifeline had been ripped away, or I finally admitted the truth, that this wasn't just about a dog. It was about respect, about being seen, about being loved enough for someone to fight for me when I couldn't fight. Alone, I looked around that house, at the walls that felt less like home and more like a cage, and I whispered out loud, I can't do this anymore. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even loud, but it was real. The kind of truth that sits in your chest and doesn't leave. That was the breaking point. Not a single moment of explosion, but the quiet realization that the life I thought I had was gone. And if I wanted to survive, truly survive, I had to start thinking about walking away. Not just from my in-laws, maybe even from my marriage. Grief has a way of hollowing you out, but anger, real anger, can light a fire in that hollow space. After weeks of crying, breaking down, feeling like I was walking through life on autopilot, something inside me shifted. I stopped seeing myself as a victim and started seeing myself as someone who had been wronged. And when you've been wronged, you fight back. That I remember the morning it happened. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the leash I still hadn't been able to put away. My husband came downstairs, muttered something about moving forward, and it hit me. If I didn't fight for my dog, no one would. Certainly not him, and definitely not his parents. That realization hurt, but it also gave me clarity. I couldn't sit back anymore. I started making calls. First to local shelters, then to trainers, then to anyone I thought might have a lead. Each call drained me, but each one also fueled me. I explained over and over. My in-laws gave away my service dog without my consent. He's trained, he's expensive, but he's mine. He's my lifeline. Some people didn't take me seriously. Some gave me pitying tones that made me want to hang up. But others listened. And that's all I needed, someone to take me seriously, to remind me I wasn't crazy for fighting this hard. That I kept notes, writing down names, numbers, any scraps of information I could find. Every time I hit a dead end, I felt the despair creeping back, but then I'd think about his eyes, the way he'd look at me when he knew I needed him. That memory kept me going. I wasn't just fighting for a dog. I was fighting for the part of myself that they tried to erase. There were moments when I thought about giving up. Nights when my husband would roll his eyes at me making another call, muttering that I was obsessing. But obsession? That's what love looks like when someone steals your lifeline. That's what survival looks like when you refuse to let someone else decide your worth. That I even considered legal options. The thought of dragging the whole mess into court terrified me, but I knew my rights. A service dog isn't just a pet. He's protected under the law. And I had receipts, proof, training documents, medical notes, everything. If I had to fight them legally, I would. That fire in me kept growing. For the first time since he'd been taken, I felt a spark of hope. A small, flickering light that maybe, just maybe, I could bring him home. And even if I couldn't, at least I would know I had done everything in my power. I wouldn't just roll over and let them win, because this wasn't just about a dog. It was about me reclaiming my voice, my independence, my life. They might have thought they could erase him from my world, but they underestimated me. After weeks of phone calls, sleepless nights, and more tears than I'd ever admit out loud, something finally shifted. I got a call from one of the shelters I contacted. My heart jumped when the woman on the line said, "I think we may have your dog." I remember rushing there, every part of me trembling. Fear, hope, disbelief all tangled together. And then I saw him, standing there in the kennel, ears perked, tail hesitant at first, until he saw me. That moment, his eyes locking onto mine, the way he pressed against the door as if trying to get to me, it cracked me open. I dropped to my knees, sobbing, as the staff let him out. He barreled into me, all weight and warmth and familiarity. And for the first time since that awful day, I could breathe again. Really breathe. But even in that joy, there was something heavy lingering in the background. Because it wasn't just a reunion. It was a reminder of what I'd lost, of what I had to fight tooth and nail to reclaim. This wasn't just about my dog. It was about how easily people I trusted had tried to take him. And me, a way that I sat in the car with him on the ride home, his head resting on my lap like he used to, and I couldn't stop reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the silence, the loneliness. And I realized something important. Yes, I had my dog back, but the trust one once had in my marriage, in my in-laws, in family, that was gone. Broken in ways no reunion could fix. Sometimes closure doesn't look like a happy ending tied neatly with a bow. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's tears on your dog's fur while you whisper, "I'm so sorry, I didn't protect you better." Sometimes it's realizing the people you thought were family aren't safe places, and maybe never were. And yet, sitting there with him pressed against me, I also felt something else, strength. They tried to erase him, erase me, but they failed. I fought. I found him. I survived. That reflection sat with me longer than the joy of reunion. Because it wasn't just about getting him back. It was about realizing that, from now on, I had to protect not only my dog, but also my peace. Even if that meant protecting it from the people closest to me. After everything, I came to a truth I wish I had realized sooner. Not everyone who calls themselves family deserves that title. Family isn't just about blood or marriage. It's about trust, loyalty, and love. And if those things are missing, then so is the relationship. I still have my service dog by my side. He still nudges me when my chest tightens, still leans into me when the world spins too fast. He still gives me the freedom that no one else seemed to understand. But now, when I look at him, I also see a reminder, not of what was taken, but of what I reclaimed, of the fight I had to wage to keep him, and by extension, myself. As for my in-laws, I stopped waiting for an apology that was never going to come. I stopped trying to make them understand something they didn't want to understand. You can't force empathy into people who have no room for it. And my husband? That silence of his, that failure to choose me when it mattered most. It said more than words ever could. The truth is, love can't survive without respect. And respect can't survive without action. So, I made my choice. I moved forward without them. Without the in-laws who saw my lifeline as a burden. without the partner who let them cross the most unforgivable line. It wasn't easy. It wasn't some dramatic Hollywood moment where I slammed the door and never looked back. It was quieter than that. Packing my things, loading my dog into the car, driving away with tears in my eyes but determination in my chest that I still feel the sting? Of course, betrayal doesn't vanish just because you leave. But healing starts when you stop giving people access to hurt you. And every day I wake up with my dog at my side, I feel a little stronger, a little freer, moving forward. Doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pain. It means surrounding myself with people and beings who love without conditions, who protect without judgment. My service dog isn't just a dog. He's family. He's proof that love, real love, is loyal, steady, and always shows up when you need it most. So no, I don't have my in-laws. I don't have that marriage anymore. But what I do have is enough. I have him. I have me. And I have a future where I don't have to apologize for needing what keeps me alive.